Hello, my name is Jacob Hertz. Welcome to my presentation on federalism. Federalism is incredibly important in understanding the interactions between the federal and state governments um, in the realm of lawmaking and interpretation of the Constitution. The first principle that I'll discuss is the necessary and proper clause, described by the court case United States v. Comstock in 2010. The necessary and proper clause is described as a general grant of authority to Congress. It empowers Congress to create any laws that are necessary for fulfilling Congress's responsibilities. And as stated here, the Congress shall have power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by the Constitution in the government of the United States or in any department or officer thereof. And again, this explicit language has been interpreted consistently to be a very broad grant of authority to Congress to act on any of the powers it's given by the Constitution, as well as the responsibilities associated with those powers. In this case, in the United States v. Comstock, a group of prisoners tried to argue that Congress did not have the ability to extend their detentions even after they had completed their lawful prison sentences. And this is in response to Congress creating a law that would have allowed Congress to extend the detentions of prisoners that were considered dangerous, usually due to some kind of sexual offense like rape or possession of child pornography. In these types of cases, they would be mandated into psychological treatment for the purpose of rehabilitation, even after their lawful prison sentences have been fulfilled. And the Supreme Court sided with the federal government, or Congress specifically in this case, basically referencing the necessary and proper clause and how that granted such a broad level of authority and power that it permitted Congress to make a law in a category such as this. Next is the Supremacy Clause and national preemption of state laws, described in Missouri v. United States. The Supremacy Clause, as follows, is this Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made, or which shall be made, under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land, and the judges in every state shall be bound thereby, anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary notwithstanding. And this describes how federal laws are, again, the supreme law of the land. They, whenever a state law is contradictory to federal law, it's the federal law that is held supreme or given priority by judges when they're adjudicating cases. And so in Missouri v. United States, the state of Missouri attempted to pass the Second Amendment Preservation Act, which would have created its own interpretation of the Second Amendment, as well as would have prevented federal laws that contradict this new interpretation to the Second Amendment from being enforced inside of the state of Missouri. And so the federal government responded with a suit against the state of Missouri, citing the Supremacy Clause, because, again, the state of Missouri attempted explicitly to contradict federal law, and according to the Constitution and the Supremacy Clause, that was not permissible. This has not been received by the Supreme Court as of yet, but so far, both the state courts and the Circuit Court of Appeals have sided with the federal government due to the very explicit language of the Supremacy Clause, stating that because the Second Amendment Preservation Act is so contradictory to federal law, that it's not possible for it to be constitutionally permissible. Next is the 10th Amendment and states' rights. The 10th Amendment ensures a certain degree of sovereignty to state governments. It guarantees that they do have some powers. Again, as it states here, powers not given to the federal government and not prohibited by the Constitution to the states. And so it gives the space for state governments to have their own level of sovereignty. And in this case, New York v. United States, back in 1992, the Congress attempted to create a federal program that would have forced state governments or that would have dictated to state governments on how they can dispose of radioactive waste. And the Supreme Court sided in favor of the states, saying that the federal government could not compel a state to follow a federal program like this. But the only alternative would be to use some kind of financial incentive to encourage rather than force a state government to participate. And lastly is the 11th Amendment and sovereign immunity. And this goes as follows. The judicial power of the United States shall not be construed to extend to any suit in law or equity commenced or prosecuted against one of the United States by citizens of another state or by citizens or subjects of any foreign state. And just by way of translation, this basically means that I, as a citizen of Arkansas, can sue the state of Arkansas freely. I do not need Arkansas's consent for that. But if I tried to sue, for example, California or Utah, I would require the consent of those respective state governments to file suit in their state courts. And this essentially created a system in which, for example, I could hold my own government accountable, or say a citizen of California could hold the California state government accountable to its laws, but it created a shield against the citizens of other states. And that is all I have. Thank you.